just welcome our panelists on stage. Ward Platt, who you've already seen, big hitter, big. Claude Ruibal, Andrew Georgiou, Giles Morgan, and Zak Brown. Please welcome our panelists on stage, and I'll say a little bit more about them. Now, while they're making their way up to stage, I know that in an event like this, only one person traditionally asks a question. That's the moderator. I'm going to change that during this session, and all of you will have an opportunity to ask questions. The only thing I would ask is, please make them questions and not speeches or statements. Right? So that's just the warning. If you hear any statements or speeches, then that's not going to happen. You'll be cut off. So I will be coming to all of you for questions for our panelists, but I'm going to kick off because that's what I'm meant to do. Brief introductions. Obviously, Ward Platt of Fox, FIC. Then we've got Zak Brown, CEO and founder of JMI, Motorsports Agency. Giles Morgan, the guy with the money from HSBC. Claude, who I gave a hard time to a few minutes ago. And then finally, Andrew Georgiou, CEO of World Sports Group. Now, it was interesting when we were listening to Lord Coe this morning. I was thinking about sport. I reminded myself of when I first arrived in Hong Kong, which was in 1987. And I remember asking a colleague, so, I like sport. What's sport in Hong Kong? And the answer was, well, there's the Sevens, and then there's going out for lunch and playing dodgems in Central. And that was sport in 1987. Now, we've moved on a lot since then. But I wonder whether we really have when I look at you lot. Right? We're talking about globalization of sport. And I got 5 white males aged over, let's just say over 40. And we're talking about globalization of sport sitting in Singapore. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, that's not a question. That's just my statement. We did listen to Lord Coe, who was fantastic, but I thought, he was talking, sort of a little bit through sort of rose-tinted glasses. Yes, sport's wonderful, it changes the world, and that's globalization of sport. But for you as the key stakeholders, and we do have all the stakeholders, I think, in the sports ecosystem, business ecosystem on this stage. What does it really mean for you when we talk about globalization of sport? Okay. Giles, you're the guy with the money, so you eventually pay for it all. Why don't you kick us off?
I think that the globalization of sport is incredibly important, but I also think that the localization of sport is incredibly important. I think sport is about relevance and sport is about engaging people, whether it be at a local level, be it Exeter City Football Club, or whether it be Formula One. And I think why this conference is called Sports Matters is it is because global or local sport can touch our souls, and sport can transcend society at a global level or at a local level, and sport can unite. So there is a real power to sport. And I would urge everybody in this room, and I'm not his publicist, but anyone who hasn't read The Meaning of Sport by former Times writer Simon Barnes should do so if you're serious about a business within this industry, to understand what sport means to human beings and why it really does impact. Because sport matters, that's why companies such as HSBC and many of the brands who get involved, because it's a way of engaging and it's a way of touching people in a way that very few other ways can, probably music being the other. So I think that the globalization of sport is important. But I think, and it's been very interesting listening to Ward, it's also incredibly important that sport is localized, because that's where the real passion stems from. And I think we'll talk about this, what is a fan? I think there are a lot of global fans who are probably brand advocates at best, and then you have the real fan who are people who really passionately believe.
So let's do that link back to Ward around local, because you touched upon it in your discussion with Jasper. So does it not matter, therefore? I mean, are we just talking, is it all local? I mean, where is this balance, Ward?
I think there's room for global brands. We believe in Fox Sports
global
as a
brands,
global brand, but ultimately, you have to have relevant content on those global brands. You shouldn't, but that can be a mixture of some global content, because there's certain, who doesn't want to watch Wimbledon? I mean, who doesn't want to see the US Open Golf Championships? I think occasionally people will rally behind these big properties, even if they're not huge golf fans or huge tennis fans. But at the same time, to care about sport day in and day out, you've got to have something very relevant, and that's got to be local. And I think the issue is that there's, we talked about, I mean, there's all these global properties that are trying to push out their brands around the world and taking a lot of people's time, attention, and money, whereas, the development of the local isn't happening as fast as it probably should, because, there are certain people who have a head start, and that's a challenge. How do you balance that? Some people have a huge head start from these big sporting cultures, and other people are trying to build their sporting culture, but are starting from way behind the curve.
But, let's get back to the origins of all of you here. And, when I was talking to Claude, he was talking about, certain things are happening in North America. There's an Anglo-Saxon feel here, right? Surely, for sport to be truly global, there needs to be a creator locally that in other parts of the world other than North America. I mean, yes, there is India cricket, but India cricket is still about India, right? Do you see this sort of shift of power ever changing from you lot? I'll start with you, but I'm going to go random after that.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot of the people here, we're all investing in, I mentioned we have local offices with local executives who are out there trying to develop local sport. And yeah, ideally, I have a global role, but ultimately, each of these markets are going to be big enough on their own that they are just part of a bunch of small businesses that are part of a global organization. But ultimately, the deals are being done there, and my role, is relatively limited input to it. I mean, you can share learnings around the world, so you can say, hey, I've done this cool deal. We have the Copa Libertadores or Copa Sudamerica rights with the club football in South America, and that's been a great business developed by our local team. But maybe there's some learnings from that market that we can try and do the same thing in Indonesia or the same thing in Malaysia. So there are certainly ways to learn from what each of our local teams are doing, and that's certainly our objective at Fox.
Yeah. Andrew, do we need more global sport, or do we need more local sport?
From my perspective, I think local is king. I think there is a real almost laziness to want to go to a one-stop shop and try to say, just because I buy the EPL or I sponsor an EPL club, I'm somehow getting some sort of global acknowledgement. And I think there is a distinction to be made between being accessible globally and having content available globally through digital channels, satellite channels, over the top, and a sport or a particular league or a club truly being global. At the end of the day, our consumption of it as a fan happens locally. Yes, I follow Liverpool. I have done ever since Craig Johnson used to play for them. But am I truly a fan of Liverpool? Have I been to Anfield and watched a game and got there, down and dirty with the rest of the fans? Well, I have, but a lot of people haven't. So how can you say that the EPL is global just because there are people who might be interested in it globally?
Right. And I think that's one of the people measured the success of the London Olympics, keeping with the theme from our keynote speaker. The reason it's successful is because the people of Britain, people in London, supported that game. So what was the thing that, people running up and down an athletics track is quite impressive. As a non-athlete, I can say that. But what was really impressive was the spirit. That's what made a difference. That's what people talked about that Olympics being so very special. Made it a lot more enjoyable than the Beijing Olympics. This was about real spirit. And I think the success of a Football World Cup in Brazil, yeah, there were some great games, but actually you were trying to see the fan reaction. That's where and that's about localization, not globalization.
Zak, you are involved in a genuine global sport. Do you take issue with that?
No, I don't take issue with it. I think there's room for all sport. Sport is such a popular form of entertainment around the world that I think it's a combination of both local, for sure, because all these cultures are different. You can take a look around the world, and some sports that are popular in Asia aren't popular in America, and vice versa. But then you do look at what globally works. Formula One, I think most would argue, is the only true single global sport on an annual basis, the Olympics being next. And then, of course, you've got sports played globally, but that are owned and regionalized. So I don't really think it's an either-or situation. I think it's all the above. I think there's room for all these sports. And then with, sponsors, it just really depends on what their marketing objectives are as to whether they decide to talk to the world globally through local sports or to talk to the world globally through a single sport. And I don't think there's necessarily a right or a wrong to it.
And do you, all of you can answer this question, do you have to be a sports fan to be a fan? You picked up, I think it was you that said that there are people who claim to be a Liverpool fan who've never been to, never stepped foot on the Kop. Is there an inconsistency there?
I don't think there's necessarily inconsistency. I think ultimately, if you have a look at how money is spent and what sports and sports bodies and clubs are trying to do, ultimately they're trying to access that spending.
Yeah.
Whether it be Giles or Ward or you don't pay. So
actually, I'm going to ask him again about that because he didn't answer that question. So be prepared.
But it's about accessing those dollars. And if you look at even what might be considered a global sport like golf or a global sport like even tennis is probably a better example because the ATP and the WTA are at least organised globally. If you look at outside the 4 Grand Slams, the revenue comes from predominantly the local market. Both in a TV sense, the local events are usually on free-to-air and not subscription. From a sponsorship sense, most of the spending decisions, even by global brands, are made from local markets. Ticket sales are almost predominantly local. The funding comes from the local market. So coming back to some of the comments that Ward was saying about what Fox is trying to do, how do we develop that local audience in this part of the world where the investment is made by the consumer locally? And that hasn't happened yet. And I think, for the businesses like ours who are trying to develop that grassroots culture of sport, once that happens, then you come back to the EPL example. Once that happens, the popularity of EPL is going to slide back off the scale because the local undercurrent of content, which is going to be much more relevant to local consumers, is going to dominate. And that's why he's investing in that local content.
So you think, what that means is that over a period of time, the price of those EPL rights are going to drop?
I hope most of that value goes into local sport.
Yeah. You said, you in fact used the example, so golf is a global sport. I think that's what you said, right? Mm-hmm. And I sort of was thinking about it, well, yeah, I suppose it is. But then, doesn't that beg the question as to what is a global sport? Because golf, for the vast majority, is really not that accessible. Mm-hmm. So how can it be a global sport?
Yeah, I guess it comes back to the viewership question. I mean, golf is consumed predominantly in a large proportion of territories. Is it consumed actively in Africa? Probably not. Europe, yes. Middle East, more so. Asia has probably waned a little bit in recent times. But there is the engagement with the sport in most part of the globe. The fact that it's not organised that way from a federation perspective is, I think, a different challenge for that particular sport.
So you're sort of saying, because golf is everywhere, it's a global sport. But actually, for the vast majority, they could not afford to play golf. How can it be a global sport?
Well, that comes back to the localisation challenge.
You sponsor golf, right? But you presumably sponsor golf because actually the people who generally consume golf have bank accounts and they are wealthy. So you sponsor golf because it targets a certain segment of the demographic, right? Doesn't mean it's global, does it?
No, we use golf to exactly that, target customer segmentation in certain markets. And because we're international, it makes sense for us to have 6 or 7 golf tournaments around the planet that make us a global sponsor of golf. Yeah. But it isn't run by a global body. and it's run. And I think where golf is quite unique is, of course, people, particularly our target market, they watch and play. And that's critical because from an engagement point of view, us being able to put on golf days all around the world, and we do a lot,
Right.
is you've seen someone play one of our big championships, and that's gone to a global audience. And then we back that up with a golf day where it looks quite similar to that kind of what they've seen on television. So it's very impactful, but it's certainly not mass consumption. Our average advertising is how we talk to the world every day with people in jetty bridges around the world. If we were going to change our brand, or if we were changing our segmentation to a much more mass audience, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't sponsor golf and rugby.
Yeah, got it. So Claude, I'm afraid they've said you don't pay, and I sort of was challenging as to whether you pay.
Well, maybe we don't pay in the traditional sense. I mean, we have a rev share relationship with all of our partners, and we actually do most of the monetization. We have a fairly large sales force at Google, and I think we're able to aggregate a set of advertisers that is significant. We also respect the existing sponsorship relationships all of our rights holders have. So if you looked at the Olympic movement, for example, the IOC distributed live on YouTube in 74 countries the London Olympic Games. I mean, you probably didn't know that it was available because you don't know that there's sport on YouTube, but you do now. So maybe you'll look next time. It was important for the IOC that we didn't violate the global sponsorship relationships they had with Visa and Coca-Cola and others, and we respect that, but we're able to find a lot of categories that aren't traditionally Olympic advertisers, don't conflict with the existing sponsors, and brings new money to the table, and that's important. I'm sure when you buy for HSBC, you don't want other financial institutions to have a relationship. It's critically important to you to have that exclusivity, and we always try and maintain that respect. Can I just speak one thing about local and global? And maybe I'm just an oddity here, but I tend to follow athletic performance, so I don't know why, but I like all sports. And what's important for me is following athletic performance, extreme performances, amazing things, and I'll get captivated by any sport, team handball, Sepak Takraw, whatever it might be. I'll watch it because these athletes are just incredible, and I think a lot of maybe all sports started local. I don't know. You can talk about team handball in Germany, massive rights fees, very, very popular there. But frankly, I think team handball could do pretty well in the USA if anyone got a chance to see it, but no one gets a chance to see it. And these athletes in team handball are quite incredible. It's a fast-moving sport, lots of activity, lots of scoring. Should do better than it's doing. A lot of what we're trying to do is take, quote, local sports, just take cricket, if you want to define that as local, and make them global. So what we've done with cricket in the USA is we've worked with a company called Willow, and we've launched a cricket channel in the USA that offers the entire season of cricket, every match, everything that takes place across the year of cricket. And that's been immensely successful to one, talk to existing cricket fans, but bring in new fans in that marketplace.
Okay. I'm going to come to you guys in the audience at this point. Any questions for our panelists? I will wait. If you raise your hand, a microphone will find you. I see a hand. And so if you can quickly introduce yourself, like name and company, and the question.
Hi, I'm a student from Nanyang Technological University. So I'd like to direct my question to Andrew Georgiou. I'd like to ask, in your opinion, what does the phenomenon of globalization of sport mean for the sports hub? Do you think that it will increase attendance at major sports events? Thanks.
I think it's a good question because the Sports Hub, for those in the room who aren't aware, is a significant investment by the Singapore government in helping promote healthy activity, lifestyle, wellness in Singapore, as well as the development of sport. It's been a $1.3 billion investment. And so the question is, that's been done without an anchor tenant, and that's been done without a particular major event in mind. So the whole premise behind the investment is around making sure that it works to engage audiences in the local and regional communities. That requires a number of different things, in my opinion. It requires a healthy mix of different types of events. It requires a healthy mix of premium international events. We have the BNP WTA finals, which are happening at the end of October. We've got Japan versus Brazil coming. These are premium international sporting events which provide the showcase. It provides the marketing tool to demonstrate what this particular venue can do in terms of capacity. But the real challenge, in my opinion, is not so much the major international events, is how do you make the venue part of the daily activity of the individual consumer? How do you make it something that the local Singaporeans engage with daily to come and hire the particular courts, whether it be badminton or table tennis or basketball? How do they come and engage with the free facilities, which might be basketball? But for me, the real, coming back to my localisation argument, it really is about the success of this venue is how it will be used locally more than about which particular major events we bring in here. Yes, they're important, and yes, there needs to be a consistency of those major events, but the Sports Hub's success will be from regional, local and community engagement with that venue, not just the major events.
Okay, so you're touching upon there, I think, something which is very, so thank you for the question, which is about what you feel proud about. If I can ask each one of you, through your, not necessarily just looking through the eyes of your brand or your company, what is it that you are most proud about in terms of your organization's involvement in sport? Claude.
Well, again, it's, I'll take an example. That's probably the best way to speak to that is, and I think this is exemplified across a lot of our partners, but if you take the NBA, they joined YouTube even before Google had bought YouTube in 2005. They became a partner. They were our 19th partner on the platform. Very forward-looking. YouTube was not even close to what it is today. They're now our #1 sports partner on the platform. Over 5 million subscribers actively embrace the platform, are using one box to kind of highlight what's going on the sport, used it during the playoffs this year. And I will tell you that effort from 2005 to the present, what is that, 9 years? But you also see, if you did research on the NBA, I would argue that they're probably the strongest global sports brand today. You think the NFL is this massive dominant thing. No offense, NFL, but outside the USA, you're nothing compared to the NBA. The NBA has just created this incredible brand, global brand for their sport. And I think YouTube's played an important role in that. I think they've realized that this is a way to talk to audience outside their core market, and it's something we do with a number of sports.
I'm going along that way. Giles?
Things that we're proud that we've done, achieved. I would say...
For sport, not necessarily for HSBC.
Oh, I never do anything other than with HSBC. I have no life. I think on a personal level, and I spoke to Lord Coe about it yesterday, on a personal level, I was a real naysayer of the London Olympics, as someone who comes from London, and I was utterly wrong. It was, without doubt, the most extraordinary moment of a city that was truly global. So I think that was a game changer. We had nothing to do with it. We chose not to sponsor it, so well done me. But actually today, there's a major vote going on in Scotland that people may be aware of. And I'm not talking about the Scottish referendum, not because Jasper said we're not allowed to, but the Royal and Ancient Golf Club today is voting on whether to allow women members. And that agenda really was precipitated by some comments that HSBC made as a sponsor of the Open Golf Championship last year and then the beginning of this year. And it's widely predicted that women will be allowed into the R&A, and I think that's something that we're probably most proud about because it genuinely will change the face of golf, because with the R&A as one of the governing bodies, this is a game that for many years has been kind of had an interesting view, which was of the time, is now coming into the 21st century, and I think that is genuinely impactful. And that's, I think, the role that sponsors should play, is they should have some authority and that they should encourage whatever rights holders to work together to try and to do the right thing.
Great. Zach?
I'll build on what Giles said. I think coming at it first from a business standpoint, we work with some tremendous Fortune 500 companies and ultimately helping them build their business through sport gets us excited. Pulling that out a little bit further, what we help them do is engage the consumer in sport, which gets the consumer closer to the sport that they love, and therefore 9 out of 10 times help our clients build their business. So it's that connection point, business building, giving the consumer and the fan access to their heroes, and the sponsors providing that opportunity is something that kind of gets us up every day and is very exciting to see when it's very successful.
Ward?
You know, I think Fox Sports has done amazing things for sports in the U.S. You know, I don't think the NFL would be...
Yeah, not the U.S. Can we just get out of the U.S.?
Yeah. All right, Marcel. Done amazing things for the sport. The U.S. with like NFL, the Sky, and the U.K., you know, I think helped make the EPL what it is today, and in a few other markets like Germany now beginning to do the same. But the reality is we haven't done anything in the other international markets to be that proud of yet. We're still very early on the curve. And I go back to that issue of the sports, but I mean, one of the big issue in Asia is the talent drain. The best baseball players in Japan and Korea go to the US. The best footballers in Japan and Korea go to Europe. Take women's golf, for instance. That's the most extreme example. Most of the best players are from Japan, Korea, and Taiwan, and they all go to the US, and then all the sponsorship money from Asia goes to Europe, goes to America.
No. The HSBC Women's Champions is right here in Singapore.
All right, there you go. All right. But imagine that's, if we invest right and other people come along and invest in local sport that way, you'll have a cascade effect, because a lot of those talent will come back. They'll have a reason to come back and play in their home country, and the sponsorship money that's supporting those, will have a reason to come back. So we have to get over the hump if we can work together to get sports up to 20, 30, 40, 50% of the households caring, and the best talent here, and enough investment in the quality of the production and other things to rival. It doesn't have to rival if it's half as good as these international ones, but it's local. Then you'll have just a huge amount of money pouring into the system. So, and that's what happened in the US, and that's what happened in the UK, and we haven't done it yet internationally. So we're very early on the curve.
Okay. Back to the floor. Other questions?
Good afternoon. Spencer Robinson from the Asian Golf Industry Federation. Following up on some of your comments, particularly for Giles and Andrew, we talk about the opportunities in golf for globalization. Can you tell us what impact being on the Olympics you think will have on growing the game and making it more affordable and accessible? Thank you.
I think what the Olympics will do for golf, Spencer, is it will make it more available. People will watch it. One of the great things about the Olympic effect, and you see it actually at the Commonwealth Games that's just been in Glasgow, is that people like to be involved in sports that they may not watch on a day-to-day basis or habitually, but because it's at the Olympics or because it's at the Commonwealth Games or the Asian Games or whatever it may be, people want to be part of the event, and therefore they'll try and watch other sports. So I think what golf will do is widen its footprint. I think where it'll help the sport is that, particularly in this part of the world, and you're seeing it already in China, is that sports often get governed or funded by government, and therefore you're going to see more funding for the sport of golf, and indeed rugby sevens, which is the other sport which is probably got a great future in the Olympics as well, because it's great entertainment and fast flowing. So I'm hoping that the Olympics will bring golf. It's tough because it's going to be in Brazil. They wouldn't have chosen that market, probably, if they had a choice. It's pretty difficult. But it will get golf to a wider audience, because the game is global, but it is very, very tightly structured. So I'm hoping you'll see more funding. Certainly what we've seen in China and helped to fund has been a growth in the game.
Just to add to that, I had the privilege of actually sitting on the International Federation at the time this was being discussed. And the key driver for the decision, because there was certainly resistance from the US PGA Tour, and the resistance came from pure commercial interest. They wanted to protect their TV rights, they wanted to protect their sponsors, and they felt as an organisation that the Olympics needed the PGA Tour more than the PGA Tour needed the Olympics. But that's not where the push came from. The push came from Asia predominantly, and South America predominantly, where the feeling was that it would actually inspire investment from governments into programs to help develop the athletes. And that ultimately is what I think got it over the line. And I agree 100% with Giles's comments.
I'm going to continue going to the floor until you run out of questions. So, I'm struggling. Okay, you're all being very quiet.
Well, I've got a thought, and it actually builds on comments that were made at this conference last year. As we talk about globalisation or localisation and why sport matters, to use the title, I have a really strong belief, and we're going to see it this weekend, sport, first and foremost, has to be authentic. It has to be authentic, whether it's a local derby between two football clubs who've been playing each other for 100 years, or whether it's a major international event. What fans, whether they're local fans or global fans, they want authenticity. And I feel that in this part of the world, there is still a great deal of scope for truly authentic sporting events. So there is locally funded football clubs playing against each other that the local audiences will really feel passion and support for, as opposed to perhaps adopting overseas franchises. And I think where one of the geniuses of Formula One has been is that you have this international event, but then the circus comes to a town and it becomes not homogenous, but it becomes localized, and it's about that city. And that's what stirs the blood and the passion. And that's why broadcasters, that's why media rights owners and sponsors pay, because that's how you monetize that, if you can capture people's passions. And I think the opportunity for Asia is more authenticity to capture real passion. That's the future.
And impossible in that context not to talk about China, impossible in a globalization context not to talk about China, and therefore the role of China in the globalization of sport. Does anyone want to pick up or have a point of view around, the role of China in all of this?
The only point of view is that there's a lot of people who don't understand it. And there's a lot of people who want to gain access to it.
When you say don't understand it, what's the it?
The it is don't understand how to properly engage with China in order to create value, in order to promote the sport. It is a really difficult organisation if you take it as one organisation. It's a difficult organisation to engage. It's a difficult organisation to penetrate, and China is the promised land for a number of sports. It is the promised land. You've seen investment by the NBA, you've seen investment by the PGA Tour, you've seen investment by everybody into China trying to unlock value for their sport. The challenge is it's difficult to do, and plenty of people have tried to do it and have not succeeded. And I think it's going to take a lot longer to do it than people expect. China will do it in its own time, and it'll figure out a way to do it that makes sense to its own development as a country. So, for us as a business, for example, we do very little in China. We do what we need to do tactically, and we take a position tactically in order to be part of that growth. But trying to access China in any homogenous way is a really tough challenge. And I think a lot of sports have been burnt, and I think a lot of sports will be burnt in the way that they try to engage.
Well, I think to build on that, it's a long game. You cannot go into China. We've been in China for 149 years, although there was a little gap in the middle where we weren't. But it's taken a while. Relationships are everything at all levels and all strata of society. We're celebrating our 10th year of the HSBC Champions in Shanghai, which, other than the British Open, outside America, is the most highly ranked golf tournament in the world. So it really is one of the top 8 golf events on the planet. It's taken years, and we're not there yet. And I would suspect it will take another 10 years to really, and particularly to get the fans and spectators coming, because when we started, there weren't any fans. So you have to play a long game, and I think anybody investing in China within sport doesn't go in for you know, a couple of years and hope it works out. You've got to play the long ball.
And I think you've got to engage in China. You know, with respect to our American friends, a bunch of Americans sitting in Atlanta or in New York trying to make investment decisions or sponsorship decisions about how to access China, not ever, you know, really spending any time there is impossible. I look at what GM's done with Man U, and if you ask them the question, why have you done it? Oh, we want to sell cars in China. And you're going, you've really spent that amount of money on sponsoring a football club in Europe, in the UK, in order to sell cars in China. That's never going to work. That's never going to work. You need to be in market. You need to engage with local communities. And if you don't do that, you're not going to be successful. And this is where I come back to, you know, is it lazy? You know, you've got white blokes making decisions from across the world about how to engage an audience that they don't really understand. And it's easy to go to, you can't get fired for sponsoring Man U. You can't get fired for sponsoring Man U.
Actually, the guy did, didn't he?
What's that? I think, I don't know whether he got fired or whether he left. I think the official line is spend time with the family. But it's a tough decision to make. And I guess the point is, you know, it's an easy decision to make, and it's not easy. It's hard. It takes time. It takes consistency. It takes engagement. And if you're not committed to it, it'll chew you up and spit you out.
Shanghai F1 event, Zak, is that how many years old now?
A decade.
Is it rocking? Is it rocking the world of F1?
No, it struggles.
Right.
And
why?
I think you fly into Shanghai, and you really don't know the Grand Prix is going on. It's 45 minutes to an hour away from the city. Singapore is the best example of how to put on a Grand Prix. It's, I think, the best Grand Prix on the calendar. It embraces it. You land, you know the Grand Prix here. You can't walk around without seeing the racetrack. Evening activities, it's great that they run it at night. I mean, this is the example of how you put on sport in a new region. And I think China, it's a shame. I think it is massively important market for most companies, but it's also huge. And so there was excitement when it went there for 10 years ago, 12 years ago, but it needs to kind of reinvent itself, and some marketing needs to be done.
So what you're saying there is the lesson is it's more than just the sport, right? It's the total experience around the sporting event, which arguably has been created here. So it's actually more effort into the plus. So it's sport plus, right?
Correct. Yeah, I think the racing is what the racing is. If you're a fan, you're going to show up. You're going to enjoy it. Some races are better than others, but it's getting the whole community behind it, and China's a large community.
And I think, taking up on that point, I think it's much more important in this part of the world, where coming back to the underlying demographics of Asia, there isn't that long heritage of sporting culture. So unless you have the other entertainment hooks, unless you have a business hook or a community hook or an entertainment hook or a lifestyle hook, then in order to broaden your audience far enough to give them the sporting exposure, you're likely to fail. And I think the Singapore Grand Prix has been the best example of that. They have created a much broader appeal. The sporting event's almost secondary, I would say. I know a lot of people who go to the Grand Prix and leave well and truly before the end of the race. You see the timing walls up in the hospitality suites. They couldn't tell you what they mean. And they're there because it's an event, it's an experience. And that's what I think, in order to develop sport and expose more people to sport in Asia, you need that, especially in this part of the world.
Right. So actually it moves away from the purity of the sport. It moves to the concept of the event and the... I didn't allow you to finish, to answer your question.
Just a little bit on China from...
Just a little bit, Ward.
A little bit, okay, slow. We used to have a lot of rights in China, and we were never able to monetize them or do much with them, and then slowly over time, because obviously other parties in China were better at, or based in China were better at monetizing, we lost those rights. But I think now it is turning, and I think traditional broadcasters and sort of video portals and the rest in China are turning more and more focus on the sport. And they don't just want to acquire rights, they want to invest in
sports leagues and sports properties. So you can only imagine, I think, if you have a golf tournament where, if you have a football tournament or a golf tournament where China's playing, Korea's playing Japan, or a baseball tournament like that, I mean, there are ways to get, people into China to care much more. And these can be Asian rivalries of sorts, traditional ones. Somebody talked about, Pakistan and India, restarting the Test series. It's that there's a perfect opportunity to do that in Asia, and some of the tensions that exist in Asia could be lessened through, a lot more sports cooperation. So, I see, we say, F1, for instance, if you had a Chinese driver and I know there have been Japanese drivers in the past, but if you had a Chinese driver and a Japanese driver, vying for 1-2 in the race with a lap to go, it doesn't matter where that race is taking place in the world, everyone in China would want to see it. And so there are ways, whether it's local sport or whether it's global sport, and F1 is a truly global sport.
But it's an amazing message. Here we are in an Asian sports conference, and there's a lot of, that the opportunity is in Asia. It's really edifying to hear, in your view as an expert of F1, that you think the greatest Grand Prix is here in Singapore. I think this region should be very proud of that and feel therefore very confident that the future
the greatest
is bright.
Rugby Sevens tournament is in Hong Kong.
Well, I guess the Hong Kong Sevens is the Hong Kong Sevens would be another example of a phenomenal sporting event that captures a city's mood and makes it more than sport. Many would argue that most people who go to the Hong Kong Sevens are fairly unaware of what's going on the pitch anyway. Good distractions to have. That's great. I genuinely think this is we talk about opportunity, but not in terms of hyperbole. It's already happening, and there's more to come.
So we need to talk more about the successes as well. I'm going to go back to the floor again. You were a bit quiet last time. I'm going to give you another chance. I see a hand over there.
I'm Priscilla. I run my agency in China called Presian. And now the China government actually announced a lot of relaxing policy for doing sports events, even you don't need approval. In the future, they are undertaking a study, even sponsorship investment will be tax deductible. So the question is for Giles and Andrew. How will you prepare your company to do further good job in China? Because facing all this favorable policy, everyone said China is difficult. I think it's like, do you find the right talents? Do you do a detailed work? So, I really admire what HSBC did in China for such long time on golf. So, but in the coming future is another big wave, after the Olympic, a big opportunity for brands like HSBC or even, World Sports. So what will you do?
Well, without giving away our future strategy entirely, we make a decision on sponsorship based on our own business needs. It's got nothing to do with sport, it's got nothing to do with culture and arts, it's where our business is going. Yeah. Now, we've just about to celebrate our 150th anniversary, and yes, we've been in Shanghai since 1865. So there is no doubt in the future that China will continue to be, as it was in 1865, our most important trading partner for our customers. So right now, we're an enormous spender of golf within China, and I would say, looking back on it, it's had its challenges, but we've got over that challenges. But a lot of that is because 95% of our staff in HSBC in China are from China. So we understand the market. It's a very local bank within our organization. Undoubtedly, we'll do more in the future in China. What that is not for now, but it's a big market, and I welcome news that if some of the red tape is going to come down, that will make it much easier in terms of investing in whether it be sport or entertainment or culture or arts, because I think there is nervousness, particularly amongst Western companies, and therefore the real opportunity, and I'm sure this is what you do, and for organizations that can help translate the China market to both international firms looking to come in or Chinese firms who are looking to broaden their own brand appeal, that's a huge opportunity for business, because there will be companies like HSBC who will be continuing to look in China to engage with customers and recruit new.
I guess from my perspective, we look at it with a different lens because we're not a brand, we're a sports marketing agency. So the first question is, where is money and how is money being spent in sport in China? And we've been operating football in China for 20 plus years. We've had an office in China, we've had our local team who are all Chinese running our football events in China. The AFC Champions League has been the event over the last 20 years which has grown more than any other event, any other football event in the region. Last year, the AFC Champions League had a cumulative audience of 250 million people in China alone. Guangzhou Evergrande won the Champions League. That compared to a total of 105 million for the English Premier League, just to give you a sense of order of magnitude of the value of successful local sport versus something like the English Premier League, which is touted to be as big as it is. The point of the story, though, is it's not until just recently that we've had a truly Chinese sponsor football in China, having been there for 20 years. Qingdao is now the first truly Chinese brand that has taken the leap into sponsoring AFC Champions League. And it is coming, you're absolutely right. We see, I was up in Beijing 2 weeks ago with our team up there talking to a particular partner about an opportunity, and the message is very clear. It is relaxing. Investment needs to be made, and we are starting to see a little bit more of really truly Chinese sponsorship happening versus what we've seen in the past, which has been international brands coming from the outside, making decisions from the US or Europe and sponsoring things in China without really understanding why or how they're doing it. And so the question for us is, once we see that coming, then we continue to ramp up in terms of our local teams to take advantage of that opportunity. The biggest challenge in China, though, still remains the broadcasters. If you look at sport generally, most of the funding comes from media. Most of the funding comes from media rights. And you still have a really challenging media landscape in China. So unlocking value as a sport becomes really hard. What should be one of the most valuable markets in the world from a media rights perspective is quite clearly the most undervalued media rights market in the world. And therein lies the opportunity, which is why you have to be in China, but it's also why you have to be patient, because it's not going to change overnight.
Very well said. The long game is clearly key there. Other questions from the floor at this point? Otherwise, Okay, while you think about it. Claude, when you and I were talking before, I mean, you were talking a lot about the uploading, user-generated content, right? Just sort of interesting as we were talking about the Asian element of all of this. What proportion of that user-generated content is coming, you may not know the exact number, but from Asia as distinct from what I would call some of the more developed sports markets? Do you have a feel for that?
Well, I can tell you, I know that 70% of all of our sports views are from outside the USA. So just, that's an example set. So, and probably a pretty high percent of them are across Asia. I mean, we get some clips, in the SAF qualifier, we had I think it was Afghanistan versus Maldives or someone, 10 million views of a single football penalty kick, high number. And interestingly enough, sort of speaking to some of the things you were talking about earlier, though you may not know this, a high percentage of the content that's viewed on YouTube around sport actually isn't about inside the white lines of the competition. Yeah, it's about surrounding the competition. And what you see happening now, I talked about how we worked with all the major football leagues to get them to put, the highlight content on the platform. Well, then what happened? Well, guess what? All the clubs in those leagues said, well, gee, I'm going to launch a YouTube channel because then I can talk to my fans after Saturday and Sunday and talk to them on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and talk to them about what's going to be happening and who's going to be competing and what the matchups are and how the athletes are doing and how they're training and what they ate. And frankly, what I'm finding is there is an unlimited appetite for fans around sport, and there now is unlimited opportunity to see content around sport because you just have this smartphone sitting with you all the time. And as a result of that, I know about myself as a sports fan, like, just think about, F1, lots of the teams have launched channels. Mercedes has a channel, Red Bull has a channel, Ferrari has a channel. I want to know, does Vettel put on his left sock first or his right sock first? And is he superstitious about it? And does he get in the car a certain way? I mean, I want to know all those things. If you're a fan of an athlete or a sport, it's really interesting to learn those things. And YouTube is a platform that allows you to do that. We get those kind of things put up on the platform by our partners.
So effectively, I'm exploiting, and don't take that the bad way, but exploiting the aspects more of what sport is. So the talent, the engagement with the star, knowing who they're going out with, dating, celebrity stuff, right?
And extending your communication with your fan beyond your season, beyond your weekend, so that you have an ongoing dialogue. And a lot of that dialogue is about your athletic heroes, because that's really what people are following. I mean, most people follow heroes in sport. They happen to follow sport, but they're really passionate about certain heroes within that sport. For you, Costa, perhaps, and others.
Yeah, certainly not David Beckham.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you guys again. Just making sure we give you the opportunity. Don't say I didn't ask. Okay. Thank you for that, Claude. Going to, I guess, and we're sort of just under 10 minutes to go. If you had, I asked Claude a sort of question, what was his, after 4 years at Google, what did he regret most? Kind of asked him that question. Or what he would like to achieve most? I am going to ask each one of you that question, which is, as you look at as it relates to sport, and obviously, Ward, you do other things other than just sport, and you do them very well, but as it relates particularly to sport, what is it that you really either feel you haven't yet achieved or want to achieve?
For us, I think it's what I said before, which is we want to replicate what we've done in the U.S. or the UK market or the Australia market. We want to grow sport to be a household word, and get money flowing into sport and get local heroes, as you guys.
So you want to take it global by going local?
Well, no, we just want to replicate what we've done. I mean, it is inherently, I mean, was local in each of these markets. You want to replicate that. You want to have Asian heroes. You want to have drivers in the F1 who are Asians. You want to have footballers, in the key leagues that are, that are Asians, but also at the same time bring those talent back. I think the successes, like I said, that have taken place in the U.S. and UK and a few other markets are the ones we want to be doing in Latin America. We want to be doing in Eastern Europe, the ones that we want to be doing in North Asia, South Asia, the Middle East. And I think we can see it's on the horizon. It's happening. China, we want to be doing it in China. We're very far from even being close there. So trying to replicate what we've done in other places. And there is a belief now in Asia the time is right. And I think that if we make the push together, we can be there. In 5-10 years, we can be pretty far down the road to transforming the sports landscape here.
Zach?
That we've never got money out of Giles.
Take a number.
I've got all weekend to try. This is probably really more on a personal level as opposed to, and probably not super relevant, other than I think where it is relevant is they haven't cracked the code locally to create the interest, and that is I'd love to see Formula One more successful in North America. Just as they haven't quite cracked the code yet in China, nor have they in America. Variety of reasons, moving around races for the last 25 years, then they didn't have a race for 6-7 years. Austin, much like Singapore, has done a fantastic job of embracing Formula One, but you're going to need much greater frequency than one race a year to be able to kind of crack that market. So just as important as Asia is to global spenders in the sport, as is North America, and Formula One has still a long way to go there, and being American, that would be something that we'd love to contribute to.
It's interesting. Sorry, I'm just going to, before I allow you guys to answer the question, it's interesting also to parallel that with soccer, actually, because has finally this World Cup, you know, there was talk about every World Cup, oh yeah, America finally gets soccer, right? Doesn't happen. This year there seems to be, you know, again, we've heard that. Do you think there is a seed shift in the US with respect to soccer? And I'm asking that because you talked about it.
Yeah, they need to follow it up quickly. So the World Cup was fantastic. I'd never seen football, soccer so popular in North America. But if they don't follow it up quickly with some other activities, then it will fade away. And
was that the Hispanic effect, or was that, and is the Hispanic effect going to be what gives it more life?
I think that's certainly a big component, because I believe that's the largest growing segment in North America. So I think that definitely will play a role. Having stars, as you mentioned earlier, about you know, if a Japanese driver was racing a Korean driver, what have you, that tends to cultivate these countries. So you know, having a U.S. star playing over in Europe would get the attention. So I think it's more frequency. It's a big place. It has ADD. It has a lot of sport, and needs
I love that.
to.
Please tweet that, someone.
And
the US has ADD.
And you know, needs to be followed up with a lot more frequency. Really no different than Formula One. Formula One was successful with Austin, but then it, you know, somewhat disappears short of broadcast for 10 months, and it needs greater frequency than that. And I think soccer, football needs the same thing in order to be successful in America.
Just to follow up on that, I think that's absolutely right. There is momentum there, but there is no doubt. I think that momentum's been coming for a while, but they need to capitalise on that momentum. And I think there's a couple of really good things that are happening. I think network television in the US is starting to take a real interest again in football and soccer. We haven't seen that. We've got NBC taking an interest in football. We've got an increasing internationalisation of the United States, more foreigners coming in, and I think a more international understanding of Americans about what's happening outside of America and the importance and the global nature of football. But I think in North America, one of the biggest challenges to that progress is the structure of the MLS. And I think they've got a real challenge in the way that particular league is structured. It is one of the most capitalised, capitalistic countries in the world. It is the most communist model you could find. Because everything is centralised. The players are centralised, there are salary caps. It almost doesn't allow the sport to grow. It almost stops it from growing, which 17, 18 years ago when this was conceptualised was fundamental to actually making it work. But now it's become almost a ceiling beyond which they can't grow. And I think they need to really have a look at the MLS, which is the only part of football in North America that can be the real driver. Unless they change that MLS model, I think they're going to have a problem capitalising on the momentum which they clearly have.
Fascinating. Anyone can pick up on that, but I'm going to go back to Giles's regret.
Regret? I've had a few, to quote Sinatra. Well, now a new regret. I only met Zak today, and we shut our budgets yesterday. So, what a wasted opportunity for us both. It's not really a regret. It's not really a regret. One thing that I would love to see a change in the industry. We're a pretty proactive sponsor when we sponsor things. We have a model of fewer things done better. That's how we choose to do it. And I think we're known to be a pretty good sponsor when we get involved. I think the evaluation model for sponsorship in terms of how rights holders comes to companies needs to be torn up and started again, particularly with the new media market, with how media now is. It's based on a 25-year-old model, and I think it's completely broken. And I also find it sticks in my craw as well that good sponsors get penalised for being good sponsors, because when it comes to renegotiation, the rights holders, who more often than not are not great marketers, then utilise the strength of the sponsor's marketing campaign to charge another levy for increased rights fees. With rights fee model being broken, I feel that it could get to a point where sponsors, or big companies certainly, who are pretty savvy about knowing the value of a dollar, might walk away. So there you go. That's my cautionary tale.
Can I express more regrets?
Yeah, please do.
I'll define them a little bit differently, and I'll probably define them within this group. How's that? And I'll look at them more as challenges or opportunities, I guess is the best way of being optimistic. So opportunity with Ward. We've had huge success with Fox Sports in the USA, putting lots of content on our platform, using One Box, embracing it, going to our studios and creating new shows. Amazing. Star, can't get them to talk to me. They totally feel it's going to cannibalize their content, really concerned about it. You know, I've even talked to James about it. He says it's complicated, but Ward and I are going to talk later, so hopefully we'll find a way forward, but at least get some guidance on that. F1, Bernie's complicated, and brilliant, and has done an amazing job with that series, but teams have embraced it, but you know, in terms of digital content with F1 on the platform, need to find a way forward and need to figure that out. Certainly maybe we work with the broadcasters, but always challenging. And an amazing global event, and we're global, so it seems to just make sense. HSBC, Giles, want to convince him that we can extend his investments around sports so that he can have that 6-month lead up to his big investments, or continue to talk to the next generation of bankers on YouTube, because there are certainly things he needs to think about there. And as it relates to AFC, well, we want you to embrace One Box, and we'd love to talk about that at lunch that we're going to have right now. And then, of course, I finally have you converted to knowing there's sport on YouTube, and I know you're going to watch.
And finally.
Yeah. Regrets personally, I feel very privileged to do what we do. I think everyone sitting up on stage here has a really privileged existence, working in a business which is also related to, I think, most of our passions. In a business sense, the biggest regrets have always been not moving fast enough. Opportunities come and go, and we don't have time to spend doing all the things as they arrive on our desk. And you know, having the opportunity to go backwards a little bit, I'd love to have moved more quickly on a couple of opportunities, and even now as we're working on a couple of projects in Asia, I think we need to be moving faster than we actually are, but we get sidetracked with all the day-to-day. So in terms of our business and what I think the challenges are, especially in this part of the world where things move really quickly, it's being able to keep up with the pace and move quickly and make decisions quickly enough.
Fascinating. Well, my regret is that we couldn't continue this conversation for longer, but we do have lunch. I think in terms of the key messages, I think they've been numerous. I thank you for your participation. I think we're all going local as well as global, and I think we all have to do a lot more and do it a lot more quicker. So with that, please join me in thanking the panel.